for a denomination. And then I give a reading and introduce you. So the Bible doesn't get read very often in Unitarian churches anymore. That's quite a change in the last 100 years. I'm going to read Matthew 25:34 to 40 for a couple of reasons. One is, I think if you get Matthew 25:34 to 40, you have everything that counts in the Bible, and you don't need the rest. Secondly, I think our speaker this morning is an exemplar of the moral universe that this portrays. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in, was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you nursed me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? The king will reply, truly I say to you, whatever you did for one of the least of these my children, you did for me. So Sean Griffin is our speaker this morning. And Sean grew up in Los Angeles, but he got to Nevada as fast as he could.
Correct.
He lives in Virginia City with his wife, Debbie. He co-founded the Community Chest of Northern Nevada, which as he has stepped back is now numbers something over 40 staff, based in Virginia City, but with offices in Dayton and Fernley, I think.
All over.
Yeah.
No question.
All over. Okay, there you go. And the Community Chest provides food pantry, employment assistance and counseling, mental health services. They have a safe school program. I've got to learn more about that from you. And other things that Sean can enumerate more easily than I can. He directed it after co-founding it for some 27 years, and now has stepped back as development director. Is that right? Yeah. He's also board chair of Nevada Humanities. He has received the Mike O'Callahan Humanitarian Award. He's also had the Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts. In 2014, he was invited into the Nevada Writers Hall of Fame. And so what is he famous for? Well, his books of poems, certainly, What the Desert Surrenders, Bathing the River of Ashes, Woodsmoke, Wind and Peregrine. He's also written a little book called The Monastery of Stars, which includes some poems about the prisoners he teaches and is going to tell us about this morning. Their poems are included in another collection that Sean is responsible for called Razor Wire. That sounds like an appropriate title. He is also a painter and has a watercolor series called the Border Series, based on the paintings in the U.S.-Mexico border. And that's been exhibited at multiple galleries throughout Nevada. With that introduction, not quite adequate to all of his many achievements, on Griffin.
Wow. Thank you, Kevin. Wish my mom were here, she'd say. Because I didn't blow it after all. So we have 40 minutes or so, or 45 minutes to chat, and you want to know about the prison, is that right? That's what you hope to hear this morning? One of my old
I
friends.
want to hear about boys, but.
I'll tell you about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a long journey. I've been teaching out there since '89. And I didn't go out with any intention of understanding what I was getting into at all. When my dear friend said, you know, I have to leave, I can't do this anymore, you want to take over my class? And he was teaching an English class at the time. And I naively said, oh, sure, of course I'll do. So, you know, that was 1989. And flash forward to today, here we are. Very quickly, I stopped teaching for credit. That was a junior level English class at the university, and I just I realized that, you know, grades and credit and all the other reasons you can come to school were not really important there. This was about how literature saves lives. This was much different than grades in college, and so after a year or two, I basically said to the guys, if you want to keep doing this, this is the only way we're going to keep doing this. I'm not teaching for credit, and there's no good time, no grades. You know, your mother's not going to think you're a nicer person. You're going to come to this class because you want to write, and that's the only reason. You want to read, and you want to learn, and you want to teach each other to do those things. And if you can't, then please don't come. I don't really care. I'm not going to be doing it for credit anymore. And so that's when I actually started volunteering, and I stopped teaching for the college because it was just much more clear. It's kind of like why you want to be in a relationship. You don't want to be in a relationship because someone's getting a grade. You want to be in a relationship because you want to be in a relationship. And that's what I wanted with them. And I realized also that it was really important for them to see this process as being honest and me not having any ulterior motives, right? I wasn't in there because all the other wrong reasons. I was in there to be in a relationship, which is a word you don't use in prison. I mean, this isn't a dating site. This isn't Tinder. You know, you don't go there to get a date. So that was really hard for them to understand, frankly. It was just, that took years for them to understand. They didn't know what that meant. Why do you want to be in a relationship with me? You know, with me, what did I do to deserve this? I'm a bad guy, or I've been told I'm a bad guy, so why do you care? And what I just kept saying to them is, I do. And, you know, maybe it took a long time for them to actually hear that. Those two simple words. It probably took 5 years. They just wanted me to give up and leave, really, because that's the relationship they knew, was I give up and I leave. So anyways, you know, one of the first guys to come to my workshop was a man by the name of Izzy Santianes, and he was a brilliant artist and at that time, an incredibly brilliant poet, but in the rough. And he did a little short piece, 1-page piece. I should have brought it this morning. I wasn't awake. Now I'm sorry. Called "I Blame Sean." Yeah, you know where this is going. So he walked around the yard. I'm sorry, I got a frog in my throat, I guess. The piece says he walked around the yard for 5 years, and he was just kind of vacant, you know, nothing in his eyes. And an old guy in the yard looked at him, because he was a kid then, and said, you know, if you don't stop doing this, in 30 years, you're going to be a ghost. Because he was in for life without. And Izzy said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, just what I said, you're going to die. You're going to die standing up. You're going to be empty. You'll have no soul. And there's an old man who said this to him. And he kind of went, oh shit, I better wake up. So he walked into the college program here. years. And he volunteered to be the college clerk. And the guy said to him, well, why don't you go get in that English class, you can write. And that's how I met him. And so for the next 23 and a half years, he was in my class.
Oh, wow.
And he worked on his first book of poems that whole time, which, you know, I helped him with. And when it was finally published, Juan Felipe Herrera, the former US laureate, compared him to Dante.
Wow.
On the back of the book. And so that essay, which is only a one-page little piece of writing, was about how he was saved by poetry. Because the question I asked him when he came into the class wasn't, you know, write me a sonnet. It was, write me what you know. Tell me about yourself, which also is not something you ask in prison. That's the last question you ask. It might be the first question you ask out here, that is, tell me about yourself, but not in there. It's off limits. And I said, well, he said, well, I don't know about anything. That was his response to me when I said, tell me about what you know. And I said, well, then write about yourself. You've been in your body for 23 or 4 years, whatever it was. He was a kid then. Tell me about what you know. Write about yourself. And he found that he couldn't. Because, you know why, he'd shut down inside. He had no feeling left inside because he had to live with himself and he felt too much guilt and remorse over what he'd done. So he had to kill that part of himself to stay alive, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. And so, you know, you can imagine carrying these chains around, and I don't mean the literal kind, I mean the figurative kind, in everything you do. And then having to sort of wake up and keep seeing yourself and the dream doesn't go away. It actually just gets more intense. And so they're never released from those chains. And what I told him to do is to write about those chains. And that was the hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. The hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. He was terrified. Because I asked him to turn into the mirror. And he didn't know where to go, right? Well, I mean, I told him, you're not going to get out of here without doing that, because I can't save you. You have to save you. And he did. It took him a long time, and he turned into the mirror. And that's why the essay has the title, because what he wrote then was this book that just, you know, was out of this world. It was so powerful. And he got out 9 years ago. And when he got out, I mean, he's a really brilliant artist on top of everything else. Very, very talented artist. So this is the cover of the last Reno, because I haven't had the energy to frankly do another. This is in 2018, but that's Bill Wilborn. Any of you that are familiar with the university, that it's just a beautiful portrait of him. Bill volunteered with me at the prison for several years. But he got out 9 years ago, and I told him at that time, you know, you really need to go to graduate school and get your MFA and write. Like, that's what you need to do when you grow up. No, grow up. He's 60 now. He was probably 53 or 4 when I said that to him. But he couldn't because he had to work and, you know, he had to survive and he had to live and all that stuff and deal with the parole office and everything else. Finally, though, he applied to Antioch in LA. And one day I got a call from Victoria Chang, who's one of America's finest poets. She ran the program at the time. And she said, "Are you Sean?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I'm Victoria Chang. This guy named Izzy has applied to the graduate program." He didn't have his BA, by the way. He only finished about a junior in college worth of credit. So it was a long shot, needless to say. Not that it was a long shot, even if he hadn't been in prison for most of his adult life. Which was, you know, this caveat that was all over his resume. And she said, "Well, can you tell me a little about him?" And I kind of laughed because, well, yeah, I think I can tell you a little bit about him. I just spent, you know, 30 years with him. And he said, she started laughing. She said, "Well, why don't you start?" And so for 25 minutes we talked. And then she asked about Bill, who Izzy had put down as the other reference. She said, I don't need to talk to Bill anymore. And she hung up the phone and he got it. And so, you know, he finishes MFA and he's still working, doing landscaping in the hot Southern California desert. I can't get him into a teaching job to save my life. But he's working on his second book is finished now, and he's done remarkable work. So, you know, that's sort of the arc of the life of what happens inside. You know, if we all go tomorrow, and we in that sentence is defined, I define it by me and Izzy, it will have been worth it. He's out, he found his life. He's got a really good woman in his life. She cares about him. She doesn't understand poetry. She doesn't understand why he writes it. She doesn't, none of it makes sense to her. It may as well be, you know, like he's an astronomer. She just doesn't care about it. And she's always, you know, teasing him, why do you spend so much time on the computer, et cetera, et cetera. But he doesn't care, and she loves him for whom he is, and her adult kids accept him, which is amazing. I could spend hours telling you about the hassle of being out. It's the hardest thing for the guys to understand is that doing time isn't the hard part. Getting out is the hard part. They all tell me, oh God, if I could only do da, 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 I'd be da, da, da. And that's just not it. That doesn't work that way. I mean, there's a big exhibition of prison art and poetry that's going to happen at NSP, the old NSP that's been closed. It's now a museum on June 22nd. He's got a big part in it. And he's still having to hassle his PO to see if he can even come here to read from his damn poems and have his art displayed. He's been out almost now 10 years, I guess. I don't know, 9 or 10. Just what it is. His parole officer before that decided one day to see how pernicious they could be and put an ankle bracelet on his ankle just because they could. And for 2.5 years, he didn't get it off because they just could. And that's just what happens. So, you know, once you step across that line, you slide away. And you know, the best thing that he said to me during that time when he had that stupid bracelet on was, you know, I'm not gonna let those bastards eat me up, because if I give in to that little thing on my ankle, I let them win. And if I do that, I may as well go back in, because I'll screw up and do something stupid. So it requires this kind of Buddhist frame of mind to stay out. You just have to go into this place that's not a place you and I go to when we go to shop at Walmart. I mean, we really have to get focused to stay out, because every single thing in the road is there to trip you up. I don't mean to be cynical about this. It's just what it is. You know, I'm friends with dozens and dozens and dozens of guys. There's been over 200 people in my workshop in 30 years. 90+% are out and stayed out, which is completely against the norm. You know, the recidivism rate in prison is around 60–70%, depending on what yard you're on. And almost all of them, as I said, are doing fine, but there are many who not, and they're hurting and they're suffering, and they're you know, they get caught up in the small little stuff that happens when you're out and when you don't have anywhere to go. I went back so when COVID came, I had to stop because they kicked out all the volunteers. So then I taught one class online through the college, and that was awful, so I didn't do that again. So then I'm back out, and you know, just trying to be with them is still the most sacred part of their week. One guy, so I have three lifers. I think two or three of the three, or all three, are life without, and then one guy is in on, you know, little time. And I looked at him the other night because he was denied parole, but his sentence is expired, so he's getting out. And this was Thursday night, so a few nights ago. And I said, well, what are you going to do when you get out? He says, well, I don't know. I said, well, have you thought about what you're gonna do? Because if you don't, you're gonna do whatever you did. And whatever you did is what got you here. This is a smart guy, an Iraqi vet, math whiz. He tutors in the math class across the hall. He knows as much as the math teacher. And he said, no. I said, well, what about a halfway house? No, I can't do that. I said, well, the not having a plan is not going to help you. And this is all sort of coming back to what happened with Izzy. I tell them when I know they can hear it, I tell them I'm not here for my health. I'm here to help you heal. Poetry is a foil. I love poetry. I am a poet. I've been a poet for all my life, and I love talking to them about words and thinking about words and listening to them, working with them around words, but it's the doorway into their life, and it lets them come out, lets them be human and whole for that hour and a half we have together. It's sacred time. I can't be with them and without it being, time when they don't have someone else telling them who they are, when they don't have a back number, when they're not in denim jeans, when they're just people, and they can be people, not others. They're already despised by enough people. So, what they need is enough love and hope to come into the world again. Imagine trying to swim when you don't know how to swim. And so the world we live in is trying to be in that pool that we're all in. That pool isn't part of their life. Even what they remember of it is not part of their life. The world's changed so much. When Izzy got out, I tried to call him for a week. We didn't answer. Because he couldn't figure out how to set up voicemail. And there isn't, Mother Teresa isn't standing on the street saying, I can help you.
Yeah.
For any of the guys, no matter if they're in a halfway house or they have the best people on the planet helping. It's just that it's an emptiness. And we met at the Starbucks just around the corner from here. The first time I saw him on the outside, which, and it was around Christmas, so all the lights are blinking and he's just like, oh my God, this is what the world's like. And it looks like, a fantasy land. It's like Disneyland to him. And so I took my iPad and I just let him talk because I wanted to record this moment for him. And I recorded him and he was just incredulous that he could see and speak and smell and drink coffee and do what everyone else was doing and sit there with me and not be told to go when he had to go. And then these were the technology gods laughing at both of us. And then all of a sudden about a week later, my iPad crashed. I could never get the photos back. And I was just so devastated that I couldn't share that video with him. But we had that experience together and it was profound. He had no idea that this was out here and that this is the world we live in. And so even the guy who told me, I don't have a plan, he probably went in 5 years ago. Think how the world's changed in 5 years. He's not going to be able to catch up. It'd take him a month to catch up just to figure out what to do with the damn phone. He probably had a flip phone when he went in. What's an iPhone? You can't apply for a McDonald's job without one. That's what an iPhone is. You can't. One of my other guys, Rabbit, just got out around Christmas. He's in Fallon. He's living in a trailer with his wife. He's living on. He has no money. He's a minister, so he does some kind of services for people when he can, but he can't get a job to save his life. The X on your forehead is it's not going away. Once you're a felon, you're a felon, and so it's too hard for him to. Oh, we lost our contact. It's too hard for him to know even where to go. When you get out, you don't have a license. You don't have a credit card. You don't have an ID. You're stuck. And you can't apply for anything until you get those things. You get you have a prison ID, but that doesn't do you any good here, where we are. Do you want me to stop talking as a boss?
No,
But, and the DMV will, sometimes they'll accept that prison ID, sometimes they won't. What they want is your birth certificate and proof of residence, so that you know you're in Nevada. Well, I have my utility bill from the last 30 years, except it was paid by the DOC. You can see where this is going, you know, you just, so it's this sort of. This is the silence that nobody understands about going to prison. I don't really care what you did, you know, I have never asked that question of anybody that's been inside, ever. I don't want to know, I don't really care. You know, all of us could be in prison at any one moment. You know, that last drink you weren't going to take at the party you had for your mother-in-law or whatever it was, and some kid runs out front of you, actually hit them. That happens. That stuff just happens. You know, that's life. Your tire blows out, you run off the road and hurt somebody. That stuff happens. It's just, you know, so I try to let go of that. It's meaningless. You know, there's enough judgment out here in the big bad world. I just have to let go of it. My wife got a little place, you know, we live in Virginia City, and we've been up there so long, we're part of the rock now, I think. She gets tired of wanting to play down here and go home at night, you know, particularly in the winter when it's snowing. So she got a little apartment down here. She loves it. And I walked to the coffee place next door the other day, and there was a kid in there, a little kid, like 10 years old, on one of those electric scooters at the counter at the 7-Eleven. I walked in the 7-Eleven next to the coffee place. And the guy at the counter is excoriating him, just excoriating him. Oh, I walked in on something bad. And he said, I want you to tell me you'll never come in this store again. Okay, what's cooking? I'll never come in here again, so now get the hell out of here. And I looked at him, the kid, and I thought, oh, this is how it begins. And that line is a very straight line, unfortunately, to right where I'm teaching. And he'd stolen something. And rather than call the cops, you know, I think he did the right thing. I don't know what's going on in the kid's life, but I hope he understands that that was real. Because that was 2 weeks after I had 3 guys at my house for dinner. All of them had been in my workshop for over 20 years. All of them. And when they walked into the house, they were literally, it was like someone had released them to the pearly gates. They could not believe it, that they were sitting across from me, not in front of an aluminum table in the chapel, but in my house. Debbie made this huge pot of pozole for them. It was a cold winter night. They came up 3 hours early because they were so full of anticipation. Their shoes were soaking wet because they've been walking around Virginia City in the snow for 3 hours. And so they took off their shoes and put their feet by the fire so they wouldn't freeze to death. And all they could say was thank you. They couldn't believe that we were sitting together as adults in the free world. And I could hardly speak to them because I couldn't believe they're sitting across from me, not over an aluminum table, but over our real table. And what I saw was the line between that kid and the 7-Eleven and those guys I took. You know, that's how simple it is and how simple it can start. And I hope that the kid would not go into that space, because it's a terminal space. You know, it doesn't have any life in it. It's been so interesting teaching out there this spring. I had to do it through the college, but I insisted on doing it as a volunteer, not for credit again. So they made me a continuing education teacher.
Your video is frozen. I'm just going to do a couple things here. Just
Yeah.
keep going.
So it's probably the subject matter. They are, they are so kind to us now when I go out there, that is the staff, it's hard how come it's happening. They've gone, like Thursday night. I went out and we waited for an hour and a half for the students to come into our class. An hour later. That happens all the time. The internet went down, the phones went down, so they had to do the count manually. But instead of letting us sit there and not doing anything, the guards came in and told us what was happening and went back 3 times to get the people to come to our room. I had brought them books and I didn't want them to not can't make it next week. That's changed dramatically. When I taught as a volunteer through the chapel, my experience was awful. The reason Bill stopped teaching with me is because they made us feel so crappy at the gate for sport, because they could, unfortunately. You know, I walked into the associate warden's office 3 times with Bill, pleading with him to come back. She apologized to him each of those 3 times. He finally agreed, and then later he just said, I can't do this anymore, because they don't care. And so it's been really interesting to see the difference between being part of the college now and how it is when you're just a volunteer without anything else around you. I walked to the gate, this was just before COVID, with the chaplain. And I said, you know, wouldn't it be great to get some art out here? I have a ton of friends who can teach painting out here and bring some more life into the guys', you know, lives. It would be a wonderful thing. They don't need any money, they don't need anything. I can get them out here tomorrow. And there was this long pause, and he goes, you don't have any idea what I've had to do to keep you on the yard. Poetry. You know, I'm a threat to society. And you know why that is, right? It's because they can think then, and they can process their lives, and they can have a voice and an identity, and it's not what they are. They can become somebody else. And so that's threatening. And, you know, we've been called every word in the planet, you know, what the F are you effing people doing out here? That's usually how I got met every time to teach. So I too just had to learn to go to that Buddhist place to teach, because what they want is for me to say, F you, and do something awful. And then I get kicked out, and then I can't come back. That's changed dramatically. The new director is the old director who was fired when our previous governor was in office. He came back because the last director was he screwed up so bad that it was just, you know, it was a mess. The new director is wonderful and cares, and he's brought a lot of humanity back into the prison. And I think he understands the importance of arts and humanities and how they do save lives. This last Tuesday also was a watershed moment for prisons generally in Nevada. For the first time ever, a woman went into the women's prison in Vegas and taught her creative writing workshop ever. First time ever. There's been no liberal arts classes whatsoever at McClure in Southern Nevada. None. There's only been VOTEC and Career Tech and so on. And, you know, I mean, I'm deeply involved with a group that's obviously trying to change this system. And she too, a woman that was in that prison, is in our group, and she said, you know, if I'd only had a book, I could have saved myself so much sooner. I wouldn't have had to waste 4 years of my life waiting to get out to start to read again. There were no books in McClure. There's still very few. We're trying to put books in McClure. And over and over and over again. What's that?
If they don't have books, what do they do?
Precisely.
Nothing.
Nothing. That's it. That's the point. That's the point. Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's so getting a book inside is a radical act. People just don't understand this. That So if you dial back, the sundial about 300 years, that's where we are in corrections. Just literally, I don't have enough time to really do the whole mantra, but it's very slow, and you just have to accept that, as humans, we're kind of failed at how we get along. We just, we lost our prehensile tail about 100 years ago, and we're still trying to figure out how to get out of the tree. I mean, we just don't get it. And so, when you treat people with anger and vehemence and frustration, that's what you get. I was on the yard in the late 90s. There was a guy named Scotty. He was one of the good guards. And he looked at us and just said, when you treat people when you treat people with sugar, you get a lot farther than salt. And he was one of the good ones because he understood that right away, right? So you don't kick the guys on the yard around unless you want to get kicked around, but most of them do at that time. So it's a conundrum, and that's just the world we have to live in, to be out there. Having said that, the lady that walked into McClure to teach is a Belarusian immigrant herself, and she came to Vegas to dance in one of the big shows in the early 2000s, and she and her husband stayed. Got her MFA at UNLV, and she doesn't like how she's perceived right now, which made her the perfect person to go into the prison, right? She feels ostracized because she's Belarusian, because they're somehow by default paired with Putin, therefore she's the bad guy. So she hates this, and she hates the fact that Putin has made her life into this kind of living hell because she's of who she is. No different than being pick your flavor bad person on the earth at this time. She sent me an email the night before she went into prison. I'm so anxious, and I told her, Vera, you're going to be fine because you understand where they're going and what they're living in right now. You understand who they are and how their experience is because of your own experience. You're an outsider. By default, you get it. You know what they're going through. And she sends me an email the next morning, and this is so common. She says, I love the women. They were so hungry. All they wanted to do was learn, and all they wanted to do was ask and touch and taste and feel this stuff called literature. She said, if only my students at the university were like this. And every single teacher that's ever gone out to the prison, that's the first thing they say to me. Bill retired after 30 years of teaching English, Bill knew Jim well, at UNR. And he told me if my students had been that good, I would have never retired. Ever. Gail Marie, my dear friend, our former poet laureate, she went out to teach with me. It used to be that I could bring all my poet friends out to talk to them because they get sick and tired of hearing me, and I only have one song to sing, but I can get other songs when other people come in. She came out and she started talking about the poems that she was going to discuss that day, and I had handed them out to the guys beforehand, and they started quoting her verbatim before she even opened her mouth. And she was like, huh? What? How does this happen? So that's just, that's how hungry they are. I got there, my schedule's busy right now, so I can't be where I want to be with them. And, they walked in Thursday night and they said, man, we had separation anxiety because you were gone for 2 weeks. But, it is really the way they come into their humanity again. That's why I do this. They can be people. And almost all of them have gotten out, which is amazing. Some haven't. I've lost some inside, which is horrible. One of my dear friends, he wrote these very short epigrammatic poems, like 3 or 4 lines, just the whole world squished into these lines, smaller than haiku. And I could never get him to open his lines up and put some breath in the words and so on, but they were so powerful. And he wrote this one poem about another guy who'd been convicted of a horrible crime. And the last line of the poem is the slow, lethal injection of life without parole. Yeah, try and write a line like that. The slow, lethal injection of life without parole. So, and he got Alzheimer's, and he died inside, like, nothing I could do to get him out. The chaplains have always been kind of the saviors out there, and, we broke a lot of rules, but he let me in and got me into the hospice ward where I got to see him and say goodbye. I think he recognized me, but I'm not sure, because as I say, he was floating in and out, but the chaplain let us be together for about 45 minutes, but I couldn't even get his family to respond to him. I think it just creates so much grief in the family that he was just an outcast all of his life, and but he became a very peaceful man. That's the other amazing thing, is that these guys that are tattooed from head to foot and tough guys and blah blah blah. The one that's in my workshop this week, he says to me, now all I want to do is be kind.
Oh, wow. Oh.
How would our world be? And I want to be grateful. He was in Oregon before this. He's actually here from Oregon. He was in a max in Oregon where he was in a cell, no TV, no window, no light, no nada. He got out 1 hour a day. He read books for 10 years. That's what kept him alive. Started to teach himself. And you know why he wants to be grateful? Because he's not in that cell. He's on a yard where time, they were doing the time is easy. The men bitch and piss him on about the yard they're on, out on Snyder. It's a medium security place. He says, they don't have any idea what doing time means. They're all prima donnas. He's tattooed from head to foot. And I think to myself, well, he's literally afraid, he's been in prison so long, about getting out, and that's what happens. I've been in the training, well, still, before I go on. He says this, I want to be kind and I want to be grateful. That's what I want to be when I grow up. And that's where Bobby ended his life. I want to be kind. He was a minister inside. And Vietnam vet, all these guys have had lives, they got kids, they got wives, the whole enchilada, but something happened. So that's a beautiful thing. But my friend, the one that's in my class now, he's afraid about getting out because he doesn't know doesn't know what he'll do. And I knew the jig was up. We have to go through these awful volunteer trainings every 3 or 4 years just to stay inside to be able to do this, what I'm doing. They're truly awful. It's like going to the dentist with no anesthesia. And they teach these classes on it with a PowerPoint. The guy says it so many times, he's bored with it. But the guy who's teaching it this last time, not the time before this, he was a guard at Rikers for years, and he said, I got a banged on the head with a pipe, and he said, ever since that, I just haven't been feeling very good. And then he looks at us about 2/3 of the way through the morning, and he goes, I've been inside so long, I don't really feel comfortable being outside. That's a guard. That's a guard. What's that tell you? Dylan was right. Some of us are prisoners, the rest of us are guards. And so you can't kind of make this stuff up. And that means that the prison just kills everything inside of you, all of you, no matter who you are. And it's the lucky ones that can keep their humanity, whether you work there or whether you are in there. It's really tough. It's really tough. I mean, I go out some days and the guys in the gatehouse will just be polishing their guns, taking them apart and polishing, taking them apart and polishing. I'm like, you're doing this because that's your life. So it diminishes you. So that's why they're threatened to only walk in. But I got to tell you, it's so much better in the college. So I'm just, I want to kiss the feet of the new director. He's just a radical cat. We changed 12 pieces of legislation in this last legislative session. And all of you that are women in this room would appreciate this piece most. Do you realize before this last legislative session, if you were about to give birth, you were chained to the bed? Imagine doing that for sport one morning. Chained to the bed. Yeah, well, that was real until this last legislative session. So we made, under his direction, we've made radical change, and it's just so huge. It's such a blessing. I'm gonna read one poem from the guys and then you shut up, because I've been talking too long. You guys. So this is my guy that's tattooed from head to foot, right? This is James Greenfield. Wind. No lift, all drag. Wind can't carry me from this place, or from this time, or my guilt. All it brings is bitter cold and biting dust, and birds to pick my bones. And when I'm far past memory, it will still howl and carry with it no comfort from my kind. And this is a guy that's only been in my class 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and this is what he's writing.
Wow.
So anyways, I don't want to keep blabbering.
Is that in his handwriting?
Yeah, it's his handwriting, yeah. Because there's no way they can type in class, you know, they took the typewriters out some time ago, they took the computers out. It's been a kind of complicated affair. Yeah, Jackie, great to see you.
Good to see you. I used to take care of Cody. I was telling my husband last night. We get colic.
Yeah, he had horrible,
Oh, gosh, yes, horrible. colic.
horrible call. Our younger son is what she's talking about, is who she's talking about.
I taught parenting classes,
Mm,
the men's prison
mm,
and the women's prison out in Silver Springs and at Ridge House.
yeah,
And it was so good to do. And it was actually, even though it was parenting classes for when they, ostensibly for when they got out and
mhm,
became parents again.
Yeah.
It was really reparenting themselves.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
many of them have not had good experiences.
yeah,
So there was a gentleman at the Nevada State Prison that, and I also never asked,
yeah,
because I didn't want to know.
yeah.
There was one gentleman there that was just the nicest man, and he was very protective of me,
Mm,
which I really appreciated.
mm,
And I think he ended up there when he was about 17
mm,
and a lifer.
mm,
And his parents had just started talking to him again. He'd been there for a really long time.
yeah,
And I asked him if he ever felt, how he felt about the fact that he was gonna be there for his whole life.
Mm.
But he found meaning in caring for and shepherding the younger
mhm,
new folks
right,
coming in.
totally, yeah, sure.
He had a very purposeful life.
Mhm, yeah, well, you pick meaning where you can get it.
Yeah, and I just always was amazed at that.
Mhm, mhm,
And I still wonder sometimes if he's still there.
mhm,
I can't tell you his name because it was way too many years ago, but
mhm,
thank you for the work that you do.
mhm.
That's really
Amen.
important.
It's very clear, yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, it's a journey, it changed me, you know, I didn't know about any of this when I started, I was really young, when I started the college, but it's become, you know, life-saving in the same way for me. My life is generally chaotic, I mean, that's just what it is, and it's the one time in the week when it's not chaotic, is when I go to prison. It's when everything sort of stills and time stops, and the guys become the focus of what I'm doing, and that's really the, you know, the magic. It's just so powerful. It's been a journey. There's been, you know, I'm close friends with many people who some are well, some are not well, but yeah, it's been a journey. I don't know what your time thing is, and do you have questions or comments or thoughts, whatever you need to do? Yeah.
Yeah, we have about another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay, I thought
Yeah,
I'd stop.
yes.
I'm curious to the future. What happens when you're gone? Is it,
Well-
will it carry on to other people that are?
We're trying, as I said, to get others involved. The group, this Nevada Prison Education Project, is a really great group of people working to make this, to change the system. That's how we got the woman into Southern Nevada. And I hope others will come volunteer. There's a proviso against ex-felons volunteering in Nevada. That gets, they make exceptions. So, you know, that's one way we can do it. But it's so hard to get people to volunteer to do this. They just, you know, I have pled with the students at the university in the graduate writing program to come, and down south. And they were, you know, the creative writing program at, UNLV is one of the best in the country. But, you know, they can't, they just, people, they want to do it, but it's still hard for them, and they can't find a way to bring themselves to do it. They did a beautiful special edition, one of these books in here is of all the homes from the prisons across the country, that they organize and publish, but it's very hard to get inside and feel comfortable, right? It's just learning to step across that bridge. So the answer to your question is I don't know, but what we're trying to do is make arts and humanities and higher ed generally part of the system inside, so that it doesn't go away. And we all are gone. There are pathways for them to keep learning, keep reading, keep writing. You know, I wish I could tell you the number of stories about the book that saved me. I asked this last week, I asked the guys in my workshop, I want you to write a paragraph about what a book means to you, each of you. Just a paragraph, what a book means to you, and we're gonna put it on our website. Just because people don't understand that, you know, we take for granted this file here is just normal. It's anything but normal. And that's why I waited the hour and a half, was to give them the books last week. Because they couldn't, they can't get out without that, right? That's their way out. That's the way over the fence. You guys may have read or heard of Jimmy Santiago Baca. He's an incredible Chicano poet in Albuquerque, and he was in for a long time, not a long time, but long enough when he was 18. And when he went inside, he didn't know how to read or write, and that's not uncommon. The literacy level when on the yard is around 7th, 8th grade, junior high, and he has a great story about being in on the wing when he was trying to be taught to read. You know, like 3 dashes was an L and 4 dashes was a Y, and being, you know, the guy teaching him to read and write. And another really fine poet saved him, Denise Levertov. Well, the mentor in the Arizona prisons was Richard Shelton. He now all of his graduate students teach throughout there. And Richard became my mentor, and as was Denise. And when Jimmy got out, he wrote many books, and I asked him to come into the workshop, and so he did online because it was during COVID. And he told the guys, I want you to think about your time in here, not as time you're having to do, but as an opportunity. Change the frame and look upon this as a time to read and write and think and grow, and use this resource that you have to remake your life. Don't put yourself in this corner that's so dark you would never get out of it. But look upon this as a way to breathe something into your life that you couldn't have had. Because the minute they step out that gate, the whole sort of economy of survival takes over, and it's not a pretty survival. It's just like, I gotta eat, nobody will hire me, I don't know where to go. But I'll never forget when Baca said that to them, because they were incredulous. They were like, what the hell do you mean look upon this as an opportunity? This is a hellhole. Why would I want to be in an opportunity? This is awful. Nobody would want this. Nobody in their right mind. But he was right. He was right. It's reframing your reality, because, you know, he went through a horrible, horrible mess. If you read one book about this, read A Place to Stand by Jimmy Santiago Baca. You know, at the warden at his prison, and unfortunately,
What's the name of the book again?
A Place to Stand.
Thank you.
The warden at his prison at Florence in southern Arizona, hot, dry desert, you know, was pernicious by design. He wanted to be there, and he wanted to be there because he could hurt people. His sentence expired, meaning when your sentence expires, you are by law required to be released. He wouldn't release him. So multiple people, big famous poets across the United States, started writing letters to the Arizona government. In the meantime, the warden started feeding Jimmy psychotropics so that he would get so disoriented he couldn't understand where he was, and he didn't know what was going on until he figured out he was being doped. And this went on for months and months and months, and this has happened over and over, not just there. So he knows what he's talking about. Finally, the public pressure on the governor was so intense that months and months after his sentence had expired, he was forced to release him. So he's not bullshitting. He knows what he's talking about. When he looks at these kids and says, use this time as an opportunity, he means it. And his great, he's written many great lines of poetry, but one of his great lines is, he's talking about his father and his father having to go to the morgue to pick up his father, to identify his father. And he reads the coroner's inquest and he says, died. And he checks the box, trying to be white. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, my opinion, but some of the best work being written in America today is by the outsiders. There's probably 10, 20 people that have been in and are now out, and their books are just terrifying, they're great. And nobody can touch them because of this experience. So, you know, there's multiple paths in American poetry, and there's the poems and poets we all know about, you know, the Robert Hosses and Galway Canal and blah, blah, blah. And I love those people. And there's the group that I'm talking about that aren't as well known and are equally well respected and read. Poetry used to be a private art form. It used to sit under its own little umbrella in the corner of the English department, and you know, a few lucky people got the special card to get into it, and that's just rubbish. It's just rubbish. It's a public art form, and it always has been. It got co-opted somewhere along the line, and it's really the thing that keeps these men from, you know, just expiring, like literally giving up. And so they come into this and think, oh my gosh, this is fire. I can learn to touch fire, and fire can tell my story, and fire can release me, and fire can bring me back to where I was or what I was, and fire can teach me how to be again. And those are profound changes. I mean, think of all of us when we get up in the morning. All we want is some stillness in our life. We want to be loved. We want to be cared for. We don't want to worry. That's what they want. And so this is the way back to all that. You know, Izzy used to tell me that when he was a boy, and this is another story that I've heard 100 times. He'd get up on a Sunday morning, pile in the station wagon. They grew up in Coachella, you know, the Southern California desert. They'd drive all the way to San Quentin every Saturday, so they could visit there on Sunday and then drive back. And that was normal. And they were visiting his brother. That was the first brother, and then the second brother. And that's normal. So when you grow up in a family where that's what normal is, what's the expectation of your life? Another dear friend who is now back in after getting his master's degree because he can't stay clear of gambling and drugs. His family would drive from the Bay Area in a station wagon to one of the parking lots in the crummy 4th Street hotels or 24-hour restaurants, leave the kids in the thing for 48 hours, go gamble all weekend, come back and try to borrow enough money to drive back over to the Bay Area. And that's how he grew up. 48 hours in the station wagon on the weekend. The kids, just he and his brothers and sisters, just, you know, deal with it. That's normal. So when that's normal, then my life doesn't have Little League and ballet and, you know, opera in it. It doesn't, just doesn't. So, yeah. Well, I know we're almost out of time. You guys have been great. I've been babbling too long. Oh, questions? Stop. Yeah.
Jackie?
The book that the Anti-Racist Culture Book Club is reading right now is called Charged by Emily Bazelon, and it's about changing the system of incarceration in the US. The first time we meet is coming Wednesday. You just have to read the introduction in the first chapter, which is maybe 40 pages. So join us if you'd like. It's on Zoom and it's in the e-news.
Thank you. A very powerful book I read was Becoming Miss Burton.
Mm.
And it's a woman's story of
Being inside.
being inside, getting out, and having to go back in because she couldn't get past finding a job, getting documentation.
It's amazing.
And it would send her back again and until finally she managed to, she has a beautiful group home that she goes literally to the prison door and gets the women. and brings them.
What it takes, yeah,
It's how-
it takes somebody to be in their life to handle, to be their, sort of, guardian angel as they get out.
I just think it's completely atrocious, and we, as a community, we should be ashamed that we would ever incarcerate a 17-year-old from our community
Yeah, I know.
for life. That's insane.
Yeah.
Or incarcerate them with no discharge.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done. I mean, as I shared with you, we're very fortunate to be alive now, and things have changed so much in the prison system here in Nevada. It's really right, and in many places, there's over 200 programs across the country that have higher ed, and that's massive. And California is at the vanguard of most of this. California, New York. California's going to turn San Quentin into the statewide rehab center. So that's a great thing.
Wow.
So
Have you ever been formally involved with any formal prison reform organizations of any kind? Have you ever
well,
gotten into that?
only the ones that are in our state that I'm involved with, yeah, but not the national.
Yeah.
So Sean,
That's been a good use of your time. I mean, you felt
Yeah.
positive about that.
Yeah.
So Sean, if you were chairman of the appropriate legislative committee or director of prisons, what changes would you advocate as a first priority?
Well, I think with the most important thing we need right now, besides embedding some kind of arts and humanities or higher ed in all the prisons, is a transition process.
Yeah.
We need more money to help people stay out. When the recidivism rate is 60 to 70%, that tells you that this is a revolving
It's
door.
a failure.
It's $50,000 a year to house a person in the back. So if we spend, maybe $500,000, $2 million, whatever it is, $5 million, that's simple math, that's 50 people. If we keep them outside, we break even. If we keep 51, we make money. So let's do the math and do better than break even.
Sure.
Part of the reason are opposed to the criminalizing being unhoused.
Mhm.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's cheaper to house them.
Yeah. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's hard work and it's slow work. Anyways, thank you so much. Oliver. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Well, Sean, this has been so inspiring. I think that if you gave this very same presentation to an MFA class, you would get them.
Right, I hope so.
I mean, this has been outstanding. So thank you very, very much. And in 2 weeks, the next Sunday forum will be about the post-growth economics. Our economics has been based on the premise of growth. And of course, growth is an enemy of the climate, as you all realize. And how can we achieve a different kind of economics that doesn't depend on more and more people building more and more houses and destroying more of the planet?
Great question.
That's Brian Thornton is going to be presenting along with Emmett Hopkins, and I hope you will be there. And also, this book by none other than Sean Griffin just came out last week from the University of Nevada Press, a collection of poetry. There is even a poem in here dedicated to and about Jim McCormick, reflecting on his time as mayor of Silver City when he established an artist's retreat there. Pear Blossoms in the Rain, I think it was. Yeah. And many other poems worth reading. So I commend this book to you. Sean has a few copies in that book box, I think. If you're interested. So thank you very much for being here.
I know your thing's starting right now.
Oh, not for half.
Oh, okay.